What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. This is your boy Frankie Bones, and in today's video we are going to be previewing the upcoming Major 3 tournament, which is hosted by none other than OpTic Texas at the Esports Arlington Arena. Now, this is probably the most anticipated non-champs event of the season. Really looking forward to seeing what they're all going to come up with in terms of stuff going on at the event. Obviously, we will have a lot of great watch parties going on. You know, Scump, Tommy Zuma, as well as many, many others, I am sure. But we'll break down all of the matches. I will show you guys who I have in all the matchups. I have my bracket all filled out. And we will determine who will be the winner and hoist the Major 3 championship trophy. Now, the first thing that I want to get into, I will pull up a quick graphic for you guys of my Breaking Point fantasy team. Had a pretty good weekend last weekend, as you can see. Snuck into the top 50% of users, which obviously isn't great. A lot of it also depends on team placement, so I got a lot out of Nero and Beans. Beans had a phenomenal weekend, as well as Nero with some standout maps in their series against LAT as well, and Shotzi with a pretty good weekend as well with 2 matches, hoping he continues to fry here into the Major, and see if we can't get up into top 25, top 10%. We will see how high we can go. So, starting things off, we will get into our tournament predictions. I'm going to go through in the order in which these matches will be played. Matches start on Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, and that is the case for every day. We have 4 matchups on Thursday and Sunday, with 5 on Friday and Saturday. Tons of matches, going to be a great weekend, and I'll be live tweeting for all of these matches as well. So if you guys don't follow me on Twitter already, at FrankieBonesYT, there'll be plenty of entertaining content there for you guys throughout the weekend. Also, a quick note before we get into this. If you guys enjoy this video, please feel free to drop a like, as well as comment if you guys disagree with any of my picks, or how I can help improve the quality of my videos. Really appreciate all the support so far on the channel, and on the past few videos in particular. And this is a great way for you guys to give me feedback on how I can help improve the quality for you guys in the long run. So the first matchup that we are going to get into, all of the matchups on Thursday will be winners round matchups, winners round 1. And the first matchup we're going to get into is the Toronto Ultra versus the New York Subliners. Now, both of these teams were 3-2 in the stage. Again, just looking at the graphics, pretty similar as to what I've done in the past. And then at the bottom, just sort of the overall series record between the teams in this year's Call of Duty. We have Toronto with a 2-1 series record against the New York Subliners. You know, only one of them really recently, Toronto, during the Major 3 qualifiers, able to beat New York. New York had kind of an interesting Major 3 qualifying cycle. You know, they ended up at the end beating OpTic in a 3-0 fashion on Saturday, which I think a lot of people were stunned by, with OpTic making a push for winners for their home major, and then end up losing on Sunday as well to put them at 3-2. Pretty interesting. Now, the way that I have this matchup going, I have this going 3-2 to New York. I think that they're a very disciplined team. I think that Kismet in this Major 3 qualifying cycle is really starting to heat up, and once you get 99 Kiz, I think he's pretty hard to beat. We saw that Toronto is vulnerable after bringing in Hixie. I think that he's a great player, but overall against a great slaying team like New York, I think there's an opportunity for them to drop some maps, so I'll give this one to New York in a 3-2 fashion. Moving on to our second winners round 1 matchup, we have the Seattle Surge facing off with the Los Angeles Guerrillas. Seattle Surge had a crazy turnaround Major 3 qualifying cycle at 4-1. The LA Guerrillas sneak into the winners bracket, beating Las Vegas Legion in the last weekend of events. Ended up being a huge matchup for them to try and give them a little bit of momentum here going into the weekend, or into the Major 3 tournament, rather. I have this one going 3-0 to Seattle. I really just don't have any faith in LAG against a really, really great slaying team in Seattle. Mac was really consistent at this stage, which I think is great. We saw a little bit of a bounce back and more consistency from Sib, and you just know what you're going to end up getting from Pred. They've looked great in Search and Destroy, so it looks like whatever sort of woes they were having in that department, they were able to figure out through practice and throughout the qualifying stages. And I just have confidence in this team. Once they get to LAN, behind Lamar, the Iceman accuracy, I think they have good leadership there. And I think this is a relatively easy softball for them here in Winners Round 1. So I'll give it to Seattle in a 3-0 fashion. Moving on to our next Winners Round 1 matchup, we have the Boston Breach squaring off against OpTic Texas. The battle of Zin's old team versus Seth, obviously now both on the same watch party, so it should be a really entertaining one to watch. Boston had a really strong Major 3 qualifying cycle, finishing off at 4-1. The addition of Beans to this team, the first weekend of qualifying, they looked a little bit iffy. Beans had one good series, one bad series. The SMGs, I think, continue to be a little bit variable. I think Nero is more sort of figuring out his role within this team, and he's becoming more consistent. He's not dropping those extreme negative numbers. But we've seen with with Vivid, rather, he's sort of fry or die kind of guy. He did not have a strong performance last weekend in the last round of qualifiers going up against LAT, but they were able to get the win in the round 5. So, pretty interesting, obviously, when the ARs are really frying for this team in Big Wake or Giga Wake or just Wake, whoever shows up. He's obviously going to be a force. Him and Beans both playing well together. Going to be a tough team to beat. I have this one going in the way of 3-1 to OpTic. They have looked better and better throughout the stage. I think New York was just sort of a weird anomaly of a matchup. I think OpTic continues to struggle with the discipline issues. I liked the way that they came back to be able to beat the Atlanta FaZe, obviously needing to win the series to get into winner's bracket. They did so really convincingly, the Search and Destroy, going against the Atlanta FaZe on El Asilo. That's just always going to be a tough matchup for them, but relatively dominant in the respawn modes. They won the control, pretty handedly. Obviously, the hard points ended up being really close, but there were some really strong moments in there as well, starting off both the hard points extremely strong, as well as challenging a team like FaZe on Mercado. So I like this one in a 3-1 fashion to OpTic Texas. Moving on to our final Winners Round 1 matchup, we have an absolute banger to end the day. We have the Atlanta FaZe going up against the LA Thieves. Both of these teams pretty strong throughout the Major 3 qualifying cycle outside of the last weekend. Both teams picking up a loss on Sunday to get them to 3-2, but obviously these are probably widely considered the two best teams in the league. So definitely for them a little disappointing to have to square off in round 1. But I'm actually going to give this first round matchup to the Los Angeles Thieves. I think that the Atlanta FaZe continue to have struggles in the hard point overall. Their dominant game modes are Control and S&D. S&D, obviously, they're on a, I believe, 12-game win streak in Search and Destroy. But Los Angeles Thieves, also a very strong control team, very strong hardpoint team with a big map pool, and I think that they're just going to be able to outlast. They're actually going to beat the Atlanta FaZe in a Game 5, so they will eventually be losing a Search, but I think competitively they are very strong in the respawn. Control is a great mode for LAT, and I think that they're going to be able to take this round 1 matchup going up with the other top team in the league. Now, as we move over to Friday, this will be March 10th, Thursday, March 9th. So we have matches on the 9th through 12th. But highlighting now on Friday, we have 5 matchups, all in losers. The first matchup that we will go through is the Las Vegas Legion going up against the LA Gorillas. And again, it just sort of falls along the line of what I was saying earlier about this LAG team. Vegas has looked a lot better. I know there's some questions, obviously, with TJ Haley with questionable tweet going into the major about starting off in losers. Maybe sort of felt like they should have been able to lock up a winner's bracket spot, but ultimately, obviously, they lost to LAG on the last day, so definitely a grudge match going back up against them again so quick, but I just can't give it to LAG here. I like Vegas in a 3-1, actually. I think that they will show up better on LAN. Obviously, that Clayster buff on LAN, he did it in Major 1, did it in Major 2, and I think Two-Real's been a good piece for this team. I don't know how much better they got, but they definitely got better, and their search and destroy remained just about the same, I would say. So with those two modes in particular, as long as they don't let a Embassy hardpoint into the mix like they did last weekend, I think they're going to be able to make it out of here just fine, taking it in a 3-1. Moving on to our next Losers Round 1 matchup. Looking back probably about a stage ago, the Major 2, this would really be a banger of a matchup. We have the Atlanta FaZe going up against the Minnesota Rokkr. And the Rokkr just really lost right now. They went 0-5 in the Major 3 qualifying cycle. Nobody really knows why. Their search and destroy has really just fell off. And it just doesn't feel like this team has a flow, honestly. Whether that's a pacing issue, their comms sound alright. So I don't believe it's a confidence thing, anything like that. But they just had a really difficult time during this major qualifying cycle to find themselves in the losers bracket. And I'm going to give this one to FaZe 3-0. Really tough to say because I think that these Rokkr guys have a lot of potential. Obviously, they played very well in Major 2. But they're really just in a rut right now. I think the FaZe are going to come out different, especially losing in that Winners Round 1 matchup with the Los Angeles Thieves. They're going to take care of business and do so in a pretty quick, convincing fashion here over the Rokkr. Moving on to our third Losers Round 1 matchup, we have the Boston Breach going up against the London Royal Ravens. And I think this one's also going to be pretty interesting. I think there may be some close maps in between depending on what maps we might see. These two teams sort of do have some weird map sets they like to pick, but I'm going to go with the Boston Breach here. They had a really strong qualifying cycle. I don't think that the ARs are going to be able to keep up with that of Boston. Maybe Asim's able to make some plays. Nasty's obviously been playing pretty well, but overall, I just think too much firepower for the Breach. I think that they do have a relatively deep map pool, actually, surprisingly, and they've looked a lot better in Search and Destroy. So, in that regard, I'm going to give this one to the Boston Breach. In a 3-1, they played each other recently in the qualifying cycle, so I think we're probably going to be seeing a repeat of what went down there. Moving on to our fourth Major 3 Losers Round 1 matchup. We have the Toronto Ultra going up against the Florida Mutineers. And some of these series, I think, on Friday are going to be pretty quick. That's why I'm sort of rifling through these. I'm going to give this one a 3-0 to Toronto. Florida's looked all right. I like the moves they've made. Bring in Tyler Fellow and Capsidal. I think that this team overall makes a lot more sense. They've been playing a lot better. Capsidal himself has been playing great. And I think overall it's just really boosted their teamwork overall, but teamwork's just not going to be able to do it against probably the most teamwork team in the league. A little bit of wordplay there, but I like Toronto Ultra in a quick 3-0. They have looked incredibly strong, and I think that they're going to bounce back in a big way after a really tough series with the New York Subliners. Toronto Ultra obviously up 1-0 on them in the season series. I don't see any glaring reason as to why that this series will be tied up after this match. And with an early exit in the Major 2 tournament, I think Toronto Ultra is going to look to make a statement, especially after losing a tough one the day before on Thursday. Now for our final matchup on Friday, we have the Las Vegas Legion going up against the Atlanta FaZe in a losers round 2 matchup, and unfortunately, this is where it ends for Vegas. They definitely looked pretty strong this qualifying cycle. Again, they had a chance to lock down the first winners bracket placement in their franchise's history over the course of the CDL, and they obviously weren't able to get it done. They weren't able to beat a really inconsistent and just really confusing LAG team, and I think that they were able to get it done earlier in the day against LAG, but after a long wait, I just obviously can't see them going up and beating an Atlanta FaZe team with a huge chip on their shoulder again. Having played earlier in the day and having lost on Thursday, I think this is going to be a quick 3-0. It's going to be a quick day, unfortunately. Hate to see that with a day with 5 matches, but we'll see what we have in store on Saturday, as we have a lot of bangers on the slate, a mixture of losers and winners games alike. Moving on now to Saturday, the third day of the Major 3 tournament. We have a couple of bangers here. We have 5 series, like I'd mentioned. We see winners round 2. We see losers round 2 and 3. So starting things off, we have a great matchup between the Boston Breach and the Toronto Ultra. Definitely pretty interesting seeing these two in losers round 2. Two pretty strong teams, but some unfortunate draws for them along the way so far with their winners round 1 matchups. Both these teams looking really strong. Again, Boston 4-1, Toronto 3-2. Boston did actually beat Toronto earlier on in the Major 3 qualifying cycle, but I'm actually going to predict the opposite here. I have Toronto taking this one in a 3-1 fashion. I think that the Boston team has looked great, but I think that some of their inconsistencies with their submachine gun players are going to come true, I think, in this series. Toronto plays like a very fundamental team. Listening to their comms, it's a little bit of a different style, but it's very clean, and I think that they're one of the teams that really play the game the right way, especially in a game like Modern Warfare 2. And I think overall Toronto is a better map pool, so I think they're going to be able to take out some of the maps that Boston enjoys to play, especially in the respawns. Like, we're not going to see a Hydro, I don't imagine, and we're going to end up on more favorable maps for Toronto, or just more predictable maps, I would say. We may not see a Fortress hardpoint in there either, unless Boston picks that, but it'll be pretty interesting to see. But I have Toronto in a 3-1 here. I think they're a very strong team, and I think that even though they get bumped down to losers round 1, I think that they're a team that can definitely make a strong run here throughout the major, regardless of where they are. They have the star power to be able to beat any team, and if Kleenex shows up like he has been able to over this qualifying cycle with the help of Hixie, we know what Scrappy's going to do. I think this team is going to take care of business and take this one 3-1. Moving on to our next matchup, we have 2 bangers in winners round 2. The first one being the Seattle Surge versus the LA Thieves. Now, this one I actually have going pretty interesting. I have this one going to Seattle in a 3-2. I think there's something sort of interesting about this Seattle team. I'm not sure if they're on the sound EQ or something that they had such a strong bounce back. Clearly, their search and destroy has gotten a lot stronger, and overall, their respawn has looked great. I think that looking overall at the LA Thieves sort of profile over the past major qualifying cycle, they've had some struggles in the search and destroy. Seattle's looked very strong there. I'm not saying that, they're up there with the Atlanta FaZe-esque teams in search and destroy, by no means, but I think that this Surge team is going to come out with something really replying to the thought of them trying to make a roster change. I think this team made the right decision by sticking, and I think I'm going to reward them here with giving them a run here in Major 3. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think the maps here might be a little bit weird. I know that LAT is a very strong map pool and it's very deep, but I think that Surge might be able to surprise some people in some of the maps. It's going to be a really close series throughout, I believe, especially with the respawns just based off of the slaying power of both teams. But I'm going to give this one to the Surge in a Game 5 search and destroy. Continue to clutch up in the search. Just sort of trends that I'm seeing. But we'll see LAT a little bit later on here in this bracket as well. Moving on to our second winners round 2 matchup. We have a grudge match from this past weekend. We have OpTic Texas taking on the New York Subliners. Again, like I mentioned a little bit earlier on, New York 3-0ing OpTic. Last weekend, OpTic definitely had many chances in this series. It was definitely much closer than it looked. Search and destroy obviously going to around 11, with OpTic choking a few 4v2s with the bomb down on Fortress, which is definitely one of their best search and destroy maps. I don't think that we're going to see any sort of chokes like that again. The hard point being close, and as well with the control just being on Fortress, that's a little fugazi. I think OpTic definitely has the confidence now, beating FaZe on Hotel, to be able to keep that in the map pool, get out the fugazi, and sort of square up on these better maps, as the best teams tend to do. And being an OpTic Texas stan, you know that I'm going to give this to OpTic. I'm going to give this one to them in a Game 5. I think that this will be a very close series. I think, again, like I was mentioning, Kismet continues to show out. Obviously, Hydra is going to continue to do his thing, arguably being the best player in the game right now. You just almost never see any sort of negative games from him at all. He's always got a cruise missile, in just about every game, which is incredible. But I'm going to give this one to OpTic in a 3-2. Home crowd buff, and I think the boys continue to show up. Moving on to our first major 3 losers round 3 matchup, we have the Los Angeles Thieves going up against the Toronto Ultra. And this one's going to be another banger. We're going to continue to see great matchups throughout the day. I'm going to give this one to the Thieves in a 3-2 fashion. I think that they will correct some of the mistakes that they made earlier on in the Game 5 Search and Destroy. I think this will be a banger. Again, 2 very equal teams in terms of their strengths. Search and Destroy being a little bit of a weakness for both, I would say. But 2 very strong control teams, very high slaying power for the hard points. And I think that LAT is just going to be able to edge them out. Toronto does have the 2-1 series lead over them. They did not play in the Major 3 qualifying cycle, but this is definitely more of a toss-up, I would say. One of the first few that we've seen going alongside with some of the winners round 1 matchups, but I'm going to give this one to LAT in a 3-2. Maybe it's getting those championship rings, gives them a little bit more of a buff, but I think that's how it's going to go down, and I think Toronto is going to exit the tournament here. Definitely with some things to work on heading towards the Major 4 tournament, which will be in Ohio. And I think that they're definitely still a strong team, but I think they're still going to have some things to work on heading towards the back half of the season. Now, rounding out our final matchup on Saturday, we have the New York Subliners going up against the Atlanta FaZe in losers round 3. These teams have not really played each other recently. The last time they played was the Major 2 qualifying cycle. And I'm going to continue the bangers here. I'm going to give this one in a 3-2 to the Atlanta FaZe. They'll continue to be strong in Search and Destroy. I think they're going to take both searches in this series. New York, again, is a really strong team in the respawn. Atlanta FaZe definitely have that potential, but in hardpoint, they've continued to have some struggles. So I think it could be a Neslo from FaZe. I'm not really sure, but these 2 teams match up very well against each other. Bangers all throughout the day on Saturday, but I'm leaning FaZe here. They just have that major presence, quote-unquote, pun intended. They always show up on LAN, and I think with Thanos and company, I think they're going to be able to show up and show out. And they're going to knock the New York Subliners out here in losers round 3. Now, moving on to Championship Sunday, we have 4 great matchups that will be on the slate. The first of which being Winners Final, which will be between the Seattle Surge and OpTic Texas. Now, I think that this is the first team that's going to be able to really catch Seattle. I have this going the way of OpTic Texas in a 3-1. I think that the style that OpTic can or cannot play with is very interesting. They sort of are a Jekyll and Hyde team, and I'm just not sure if Seattle is going to be ready for it. I think that there might be some interesting map picks in here that may favor OpTic, and overall I just sort of like the momentum that they will have built throughout this Major 3 run. Again, obviously the green wall at home will be a massive factor for them, but I think that they're going to come into this Championship Sunday really fired up, knowing how much this matchup means, almost as much as the grand final in a way. Really, if you're able to take care of business here in the Winners Final, you secure yourself a top 2 placement. Obviously, that's not what they're shooting for. They're looking to repeat as major champions, being hosted by OpTic Texas. But I'm going to give this one to them in a 3-1. I think there might be a little fugazi in this series somewhere. I'm not sure exactly what it'll be in terms of a map pick or plays in Search and Destroy, but I think OpTic's a really interesting S&D team, and I think they might be able to put out this little run that Surge has been going on in Search and Destroy. Moving on to our second matchup of the day, we head to losers round 4, where we have the Atlanta FaZe going up against the Los Angeles Thieves. Now, again, we see a rematch from winners round 1, and I think it's going to go the same exact way. I think I have LAT in a 3-2 fashion. I think that they will continue. It'll be a pretty similar series. I'm not sure if the maps will be exactly the same, but 2 teams that are great at making adjustments, so I think the series will be a little bit different in terms of map set and strategy, but LAT has been an incredibly strong team on LAN ever since Major 3 last year and Major 4, obviously winning Major 4 and going on to become world champions. I'm going to give this one to a 3-2 in favor of LAT. Just sort of makes sense. I think FaZe definitely have some things to work on, and I think LAT is just a little bit more complete as a team. Obviously, the individual performances from FaZe have been incredible, but overall, I think going up against another strong team like we saw in OpTic, there are definitely some holes on this team when it comes to respawn. I don't think that LAT is going to fail to take advantage of these, and I think that they're going to end up taking another Game 5 Search and Destroy off of them here in this tournament to send them packing from this Major 3 tournament. Now we head to the losers finals of Major 3. We have the Seattle Surge going up against the Los Angeles Thieves. I have this going the way of the Los Angeles Thieves in a 3-1. I think that coming off of their matchup from the day before, I think that LAT is able to make a lot of adjustments, whether that be in terms of their overall play style and trying to shut down Pred, to the maps that they end up picking and playing in this series. I just think they're going to be able to make the adjustments. We've seen them in the previous tournament make this run from losers on Championship Sunday, and I think that they're going to be able to repeat this performance. Not sure exactly how close some of these maps will be, but I think the adjustments they're going to make overall as a team, they're a very smart team, great coaching staff and analysts, so I think that they're really able to bounce back from the matchup the day before. Now I'm going to give this one to LAT in a 3-1 fashion. Now this will bring us to a banger of a grand finals. We have the LA Thieves going up against OpTic Texas for all of the bread in the home stadium in front of the green wall of OpTic Texas. This has become a pretty good rivalry, I would say. Definitely not quite as much as OpTic going up against FaZe, but especially with Nadeshot being there, I think that there's a little bit of added drama to this matchup, and I'm going to feed into it. I have this going the full 7 games, being a best of 7. And I'm obviously no doubt going to give it to OpTic Texas. You guys already know me. Maybe if you can manifest it, if you build it, they will come. And I think that OpTic, just strangely will continue to play well at their home major. They won it last year, obviously. It was the first major, so pretty interesting as to, map vetoes, things like that. But I think by this point that this OpTic team will be pretty veteran. They made a great run throughout this tournament, obviously making it all the way through the winner's bracket. And I think it's just going to be a thing where Thieves are going to run out of gas in that Game 7 S&D. Again, they've had trouble in Search and Destroy and sort of clutching, I would say, in a way. But I think it's going to be an absolute banger of a grand final. I think that this will be probably the best tournament that we have all year. And that's just sort of dependent on some of the matchups that we see, as well as the grand final obviously taking place between two great teams. But I'm going to give this one to OpTic Texas in a 4-3 fashion. They take it all the way. I think that they'll win the Search and Destroys in this series. And I think that may become the new bread and butter mode for OpTic. Obviously, over the past couple of years, they've struggled in control. It's obviously a very strong mode for LAT, as well as being a very strong respawn team overall. But I'm going to give this one to OpTic Texas in a 4-3 fashion, and they will lift their own trophy at the Major 3 Championship. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed my breakdowns of all the matchups and all the teams. Hopefully you guys are rooting for my fantasy players as well. Obviously probably not, but we'll see how far we can get in terms of a placement there. Trying to get better and better each major cycle. It's my first year doing it, so I'm still trying to figure out the algorithm, much like YouTube in a way. But let me know down in the comments below what you guys disagree with, if you guys agree with my picks. Obviously, I'm an OpTic homeboy, so you know that I'm going to pick them to go all the way in their home Major 3 tournament. But again, if you guys enjoyed this video, please feel free to drop a like. If you guys disagree or have any comments for me in terms of improving the content, please feel free to drop them down in the comments down below. But for now, that's going to do it for this video, guys. This has been your boy Frankie Bones, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.